So, Jim, what apparently happened and how did we get here and what is the apparent story?
Nothing happened. We didn't get here. This doesn't come from anywhere. Time is a belief. It's an illusion. And the story is that there's time, that there's consequential time, that there's a sequence of events, which I then call my life. Time for the individual is actually hope. Hope that in the future I'll find what I think is missing now. When there's no individual, there's no time, there's no story.
So, is this a hopeless story then?
The story is hopeless because the individual is looking for something that it can't ever find, which is endless happiness. It's a dream.
What is the story of me then?
The story of me, it's time, and the story of me has certain basic fundamental components. And it starts off with a knowing, owning, which is then engenders seeking. And knowing and owning is the first experience of separation. Knowing and owning, then comes out of that, comes the experience, or the, experience is a good word, that what is has meaning and purpose. And that it's my job or up to me to find the meaning and purpose of my life. And that's my story. That's what me is. That's all me is. And me, if you bring it down to what's happening, it is right now there's a feeling that something needs to happen for this to be what's longed for. And that's the illusion. Nothing has to happen.
Why are there so many teachers that likes to talk about the story of me, the story of me attaining, the story of me getting enlightened?
Well, if you assume that the teacher, a particular teacher, is a teacher of integrity, then what's probably happening is there's been a realization of certain aspects of an experience, an aspect of detachment, an aspect of I. So it is possible for the experience of I to realize God. That's the experience. I am God. I and God are one. And then there is a movement, a willingness or a want to share that, to tell people. Because I feel like I am now enlightened. I want to tell other people about how to become enlightened. And there's all sorts of realizations, that very powerful ones, that the experience that I can have. And then I will want to go out and tell other people about how to have them or what it's about.
Why is that a little bit scary and almost like a cautionary tale? Because there's so many stories of teachers apparently, getting I am enlightened and all of a sudden have a shift or a change in their teaching, becomes like cult-like or becomes about money or followers.
Why does that happen?
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens, actually. I mean, I just have to make something up, but it seems to me that the states and the realizations that people can have or find are probably somewhat inconsistent and still have that aspect of me in it, the knower and the owner of what's going on. So it's supreme knowing. So it still has to do with me, and I can only be about me. Everything that arises, when me arises, it actually is a cloud. There's no actual experience that arises in the body. There isn't ever anything really in the body. It arises in the appearance as a cloud of knowing and owning. So everything that is or isn't me is about me. And so if I have realizations, I've had them. And if anybody who comes into the purview, that will also be something that's either happening to me or not happening to me. So it'll all be part of my story of me or I am or whatever it is I've realized. And so they'll then be a part of that. And I guess there's an interaction going on there of power coming to the one who has realized whatever it has realized from the adulation or the recognition or whatever happens outside, and then that coming in and then going back out, and that sort of exchange.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of teachers right now that speaks about non-duality and therapy. and especially a lot of
Yeah.
people kind of like coming about with trauma, that somehow this teaching of no teaching of non-duality has to be evolved and included with trauma sensitive training or some therapy. What's your comment about that?
Well, I've actually just written an article on that, which hopefully I'll be done with soon, about how non-duality, the Advaita, has been appropriated by spiritual teachings and therapies as to take it. You must be taking it as a sort of a philosophy for you to think that you could apply it to something. And from this point of view, is that's a complete misunderstanding of what's being suggested. The suggestion that is that non-dualism is pointing to that which has no separation, which doesn't have an opposite. It's pointing to what is already, not what could become, or not something that's missing, or not a state that can be found. It's pointing to what is already. So there's no way for that to be used. I consider that applied non-duality, which is an oxymoron.
To me, it's very contradictory. Therapy and non-duality. It's
Well,
very,
it's just a misunderstanding. It's taking it as a philosophy. It's taking it as non-duality being a state or something separate, which can be acquired. It actually is taking prisoner the individual, because it suggests that there's a real individual, which there's a real problem, and through its free will of its own, it will be able to find what it's looking for. So it takes it prisoner.
I really like this messaging of contemporary non-duality. It's very rare to me, and it's very unique, and it's something that's
Yeah,
only been here for about 20 years. I don't think
yeah,
anything was like that before. So there was a different kind of communication about it. And for some
yeah,
odd reason, people right now are trying to take this contemporary non-duality and trying to attach it to Advaita Vedanta, or saying that
yeah,
there's a lot of argument about that. Um,
yeah.
and then Neo Advaita became a hot topic. What's the difference between Neo Advaita and contemporary non-duality?
Well, I'm not a real, what do you call it, scholar on contemporary Advaita or Advaita Vedanta and the Upanishads. But as far as I know, Advaita Vedanta is a school of thought. It's a philosophy where it suggests that there's an individual that has to reach or at least acknowledge certain levels. There has to be some preparation in order to move into the teaching or the knowledge of Advaita. And contemporary non-dualism or non-separation points out that that whole experience of separation is just simply illusory, and there is no one to prepare. There is nothing that needs to happen. Again, there's nothing to apply, because this message is there's nothing separate already. And those are very, very different messages. The one where there's a real person who has to have a real preparation to find something that is separate, and the one that suggests that any separation is illusory, and there's no one that ever finds non-separation because there isn't anything but non-separation.
What's the difference between the no concession type of non-duality to a concession type of non-duality that tries to please the me? What's the big difference?
Well, I don't think concession, what you called concession non-duality, is trying to please me. It comes from the only way someone could suggest that someone else could find something is because they feel either that they found something or that separation is real. And it's only from that experience that separation is real that there's a suggestion that being more conscious, more aware, by developing awareness or detachment could be a benefit in finding non-separation, can only come out of the experience that separation is real. The not concessionless isn't really concessionless as a choice. It's concessionless because it's been recognized that there isn't any separation. There's no way to create non-separation because there is only non-separation. Separation, that experience, is completely illusory. So that will never find non-separation. It isn't, in essence, separate either. It's an illusion.
Thank you so much for
So
that.
there's nothing to concess with. That's not a word. There's nothing to compromise. There's nothing to compromise with. That's the whole point.
The no compromise is a better term than no concession.
Yeah.
I like that the meetings that happens with you, with Tony, is very much of starving the me. The me doesn't get a chance. And in contrast, a lot of the kind of like, if you look at like Byron Katie, or a lot of the people that, let's talk about your suffering kind of thing, or Jeff Foster.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
and there seems to be a massive difference between the two. And and I think the suffering has a bigger audience because people want to be able to talk about the me nonstop.
Yeah.
And in your experience, talking about this, do a lot of people come to your meetings with sufferings? Do a lot of people come with sufferings or me stories?
It doesn't go anywhere in the meetings because, like you said, the whole experience is starved, not with an intention to starve, but out of the recognition that the reality is there is no individual. So there isn't anyone to talk to about non-dualism. So that recognition that there isn't an individual and there is no one to talk to about non-dualism starves that experience that separation is real. And as far as the other people you mentioned and the other methods that you mentioned, the message there's nothing wrong with therapy. There's nothing wrong with any of that. There's nothing right with anything either. The only thing that's pointed out here, and there's no teachers being criticized. What is criticized and what the message does inevitably point out is that the suggestion that someone can find the end of separation is an illusion. And if anyone suggests that, then that message is misleading. But if someone's trying to help someone else because they have trauma in their lives, well, why not? Therapy seems to work. It's just limited to the illusory experience of the individual.
Thank you. I like that. I like that because for me, this is my opinion. The no message is complete already. That there's no self. That's complete. That's just
totally
irrefutable. You can't that. And then how come there's this discussion right now, especially with I talk to so many speakers and teachers right now, that this is this way and this is that way, and that therapy should be a part of non-duality now.
Okay. Well, I've just said that therapy, there's nothing right or wrong with therapy, but to suggest that therapy can lead to what is already is an illusion. It doesn't, it's just misleading. And it comes from a position, it can only come from a position that has the experience that duality is real and therefore can be overcome through personal effort, which is an illusion.
Thank you. There's also I'm also noticing right now that there seems to be a confusion now with people talking about free will or determinism.
Yeah.
And some and this is what I've noticed, that some speakers would talk about that there is free will, but they come from a little bit more of the Advaita Vedanta or come from that suffering part. And then the people that the no concession or no, what was the other word that we came up with?
No compromise?
No compromise, that there's no free will. What is your comment about that?
Well, there isn't anyone. So where would free will come into it? And I mean, the train's already left the station. All you have to do is read neuroscientists. They will tell you that it's obvious that the brain does it. It's a story that the brain does it, but still, that it happens in the brain. And then after a decision is made, that energy that takes ownership, that cloud comes in and has the experience that I made the decision. But then the train's already left the station on that. They already know. But as long as there's an individual, there is an experience of free will and choice.
And if there's also an individual, there's also an experience of time and space. Is there
Real time and real space, yeah,
real space?
absolutely. And you can't expect someone who is in that dream experience of real time and space, real free will and choice, not to, if they're a teacher, not to teach them. Because that seems undeniable in their experience. That's what's happening. And that's basically what a lot of teachers teach, is what's in your experience.
Got it. Yeah. There's also a lot of teachers that have experiences through psychedelics. I think we talked about this the last time. And I shared you that my experience was I was just high.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tried DMT and I was like, okay, it took me to a different, mind space.
Yeah.
But to me, that was still just an experience. But a lot of people are, and that's their experience. This is not to contradict or to criticize those teachers that say that they got their non-dualistic experience from, say, LSD or mushrooms, or they had an awakening, with psychedelics. What's your comment about that?
Well, for me, it would be an experience. If it's drug induced, it'll have to do with the brain, and it'll be an experience. It's quite obvious that the reality of not two-ness is not an experience.
So a lot of teachers that are talking about the non-dual experience and not really talking about non-duality.
Yeah.
You can talk about non-dual experience is just another fancy word for a spiritual experience, which is also in the realm of the understanding of the me. So
what happens to me is that, well, as far as I've seen, is that there's certain glimpses. And then when there's a glimpse, when there's no one, there's a glimpse of what this is without anyone in it. The timeless, unconditional isness that can't be named. And then a me comes back, or an owner, that cloud comes back and wants to put it in context, because that's its job, is to put everything that seems to be happening to it into context. And so it puts this non-experience into a context which it can understand, which it wasn't. And what that does is that separates that from this, which it isn't. So there is no real past glimpse. This is every glimpse. And as long as there's someone to own it, then that glimpse will be part of the story of the individual. It'll be put into a context. And if it is seen as an experience, then it's something they can tell you about, something they can share, and maybe even help you to find.
So that's what happens then. So somebody has a glimpse, write a book about it, and then they'll start teaching about it. And then even if the glimpse was just a glimpse, temporary glimpse, they don't realize that everything is a glimpse. There's no such thing as a glimpse, because a glimpse makes it special or makes it separate.
Absolutely. Not everyone does that. I mean, there are people who where it's recognized. I just have conversations with a lot of people. And so there's a number of people who have glimpses and recognize that it has nothing to do with anything they remember about, because it's not able to be remembered. So I'm not saying that everybody does that, but that does seem to happen, that it puts into a story of me, it happened to me, and now I know something that I didn't know before, and I can tell people about it.
Yeah, similar things happened to me. I had glimpses. I was in the rave scene. I was a DJ and I raved. So I tried a whole bunch of things. So I would have my DMT experience or mushroom experience. But at that time, I really just saw it as an experience. But when I became spiritual, when I became a spiritual teacher, I started attaching that into non-dual experiences, which are not. It's just another story.
That is such a beauty of this message, is that when any sort of glimpses arise, or the end of me arises, it doesn't give any context. It doesn't give any overlay on some sort of religious concepts or ideas of what that means about anything. It lets it just be what it is, because there is no suggestion that it needs to be anything in particular. So it's just simply what's arising or what's happening as that. And that's such freedom.
It is such freedom, because, I think maybe a few days ago, I was just walking down the street and I was feeling this beautiful experience of like being on drugs, walking into trees and everything. And in contrast, a couple of days ago, I was crying and having this experience of sadness. But there's no specialness. It's just an experience. Everything else is just an experience. And I think a lot of teachers tend to do right now is they'll have a big story about an experience, make that into a bestseller book, talk about the method, about teaching that and how to get there. And at the same time, not really understanding what is.
No, well, nobody ever understands.
Nobody understands it. Yeah.
Yeah. It truly is an undeniable end of the need to understand what this is.
It is. So can you say that, because there's no me, is there an end to suffering? A lot of people have this big question about the end of suffering.
Well, so it depends what you call suffering. Because if you step on my foot, on the foot in this body, there'll be pain. So if that's what you call suffering, no, that doesn't end. If you call seeking suffering, then that ends. And seeking does have the effect, or certain effects on the emotions, in that, there's this cloud of ownership, cloud of knowing. When there's a seeker, everything arises in that ownership cloud, which has intention, meaning, and purpose. And so there's a lot of, I don't know what you call it, dealing with the emotions and thoughts, putting them into context, putting them into my life, pushing away, pulling them in, and manipulating them, trying to make them what they should be, rather than nobody doing anything and everything just being what it is. And you could say that sort of mental and emotional manipulation also is suffering, because it creates a dynamic where things go around in circles, and what should and shouldn't be, and how I should and shouldn't be, sort of an emotional straitjacket of meing, trying to be the way things should be, so that I can find what my experience says is lost. And that of course also ends with the experience that this is personal, or the experience that this is happening to someone. So in that sense, you could say suffering ends. But to say that there's no more pain, or no more sadness, or no more anger, I think would be misleading. Or an endless state of happiness, which is I think what me generally looks for, would be misleading. That's not the way it is.
I had one of those glimpses maybe about 15 years ago that I thought that I was super happy, nothing bugged me anymore. And then I think the moment that one suffering came, I just got really, really upset. Like, I lost it. I had it, but I lost it. There's this sense of getting it and losing it, and it's just a cyclical pattern of not getting it and getting it over and over again. So is the end of the me the end of seeking?
Yeah, absolutely. Period. Me is the only one that seeks. If there's no me, there's nowhere. The me is, in a way you could say, death. Me is also the experience of something else. So the me is always looking to add something to itself, as it's having the experience that this is somehow incomplete. So now I forgot the question. So the me is always seeking something else. Like I said before, one of the initial movements of me is something needs to happen, which is generally seeking. And when there's nowhere else and nothing else, where else would you go to look? That's not how it falls away, that there's a recognition that there's nothing else, but that whole me construct falls away, and there's obviously nothing missing. It's already complete. It's not the fulfillment of seeking. It's the end of the seeker, which is the revelation that this appearance is already indescribably what it is.
I was watching a video before of a teacher that apparently got this and then had a breakdown saying that I don't have this. Yeah. Really honest on her part, which is really commendable, by saying very, very vulnerable of way of saying that, so a lot of teachers, then the me has not really ended yet.
Yeah.
Because there's still seeking happening, or there's still suffering happening. And so do a lot of these teachers know that there's still a me going, or do they think that the me has completely disappeared?
Well, I don't know that anyone really knows. It's pretty obvious when there is no me. There's no doubt about there being a me or no me. But then again, when the me falls away, the falling away is completely unexpected.
In essence, there's no really techniques. There's no really
There's
step,
no me.
there's no levels because there's no
There's
me.
no me.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So the whole thing that we're talking about, the end of me, the end of suffering, the end of seeking something else, death, that's just a story. That's just a story giving a context to an apparent illusion. Because really, there is no me. There's no me. There's simply this. And it is indescribably complete already. It's unconditionally what it is already.
How come when this is so simple and so clear and yet so complex?
It's not complex.
Okay. That's true.
How is it complex?
I don't know. Actually, it's not.
No.
It's
No.
not.
I mean, the description of me can sound sort of complex. There are actually just a couple of basic aspects to that me. But what can't be spoken about and what's longed for is just simply what is, which isn't describable. It's what is and isn't. It's emptiness arising. And it couldn't be more simple. And that is, I think you're right, impossible for the me to get a hold of, and therefore it makes complex theories about it. There's just nothing, like you were saying in the beginning, this message doesn't give anything to the individual because there isn't anything in it for the individual. It is the recognition that there's only what's happening, and what's happening has no hope for the future, which the individual is completely attached to hope that something needs to happen, something will happen, which will find or bring about what it feels is missing. And the message is, this is already complete. That experience is an illusion. There's nothing in it. And it's simple.
Let me rephrase that question. It's so simple, it's so clear, but it's so much avoided. The me doesn't like it. It wants to avoid this clarity.
It actually has no relationship to it. It just makes a story. If you listen to people, what often you'll hear is a misunderstanding of the message. And then they will attack that misunderstanding. I have yet to find anybody who understands what's being said and is able then to somehow move away from it or attack it. Because in the end, the message makes no claims. It only says, this is what's happening. That's the end of it. So that there's nothing really to attack. You could say, well, that's not it for me. Fair enough. It isn't for you. But as far as it having some claim which could be torn down, that just has to be a misunderstanding because it takes no position. The message has no position at all, except there's only what's happening.
And it's a very impersonal message.
Yeah.
Very impersonal. And
yeah.
And I love it. I love it. It's just
yeah, same here.
It's just, and it's something that can be talked about for hours about nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nothing personal.
No.
And no message, no agenda,
no
nothing. And it's just so liberating to talk about this freedom.
Yeah.
Whatever this is. And so when is the book coming out, Jim?
Yeah, right. Who said I was writing a book?
Rita.
I need to talk to
Help
Julie.
me here.